All right. Hello, and welcome back to this fun-filled episode of the Hammercast with none other than Clif Harski, whom, if you have not heard of, you are wrong and bad, and we're going to fix it right quick. I'm going to have him give a nice long background about himself. I've known this guy for very many years. I think he was maybe the 25th episode. I think the 25th episode I did of this. Like this is back in I think December 2019. We recorded a call. A good time was had by most, and we are going to relive those good old times, and in particular dive into a lot of his thoughts, many of which I share on the topic of exercise variety. Before we do that, of course, I'm going to remind all of my dear listeners, the new and old, that if you have not yet grabbed my 9-minute kettlebell and bodyweight challenge, well, you're missing out. You should go get it. You can go to 9minutechallenge.com, get yourself a copy. It is based around one singular movement pattern, the gait pattern, but trained in multiple different ways, such as with variations of crawling, loaded carries, so on and so forth. And the idea behind it is that you add it to your regular programming. You're not putting the rest of your stuff to the side and using this as a detour. This is kind of like an accelerant to help you to make mad gains much more quickly and do so without completely burning yourself out. So go to 9minutechallenge.com, get your own free copy, have a good old time, get super strong, and there you have it. There you be. Final thing I will point out is that sometimes Cliff and I like to be swear bears. So if you have kids in the car or wherever, this might be a good episode to put in the naughty file that you listen to later on. So we don't want to teach your kids words that they have not yet heard. When I just kind of, give them a little time to pick that up on the schoolyard. So without further ado, Cliff, thank you for coming back.
Yeah, you don't want to be like my kid on the way to school yesterday with his mom going, "Daddy said fucking A."
Yeah.
Yeah, great way. Well, thank you for having me back, man. I'm excited to be here. It's refreshing talking to another kettlebell guy that, in my opinion, gets it.
Yes, thank you. I do think I get it because it's funny. I was thinking about this recently. I'm like, I was very much, I don't want to say drinking the Kool-Aid because I think it's somewhat derogatory, particularly because, and not derogatory in the sense that, it's like an all-out criticism, but we'll say towing the line. That's maybe a little bit more neutral of, some of the people that I'd followed in the kettlebell world for a very long time. And I don't remember exactly when it was that I started getting interested in doing more than just 2 to 3 exercises at any given time. But I think the roots of it actually stem back a little ways because I got really into like one-arm push-up training and pistol squats and stuff like that in like 2011 when I got my first one-arm push-up, and then I was like body weight training crazy, and I think that was kind of the impetus for me to be like, well, you know what? I noticed a lot of things got better when I started doing different things, and I wasn't just doing the same thing over and over again. And just slowly but surely, I started to let that kind of open my mind further and further. And I think that a lot of times variety gets only like the most rudimentary of props in the kettlebell world. People are like, yeah, you can do specialized variety, but usually what they mean is like a minor change and then just doing the same exercise over and over again. And if anybody's ever had issues with shoulders bothering them, knees, back, whatever, probably a part of it has to do with a lack of variety. And you're probably the guy who knows the most about variety, and you've done more of it with kettlebell training. When was your kind of like aha moment that, maybe doing the same thing the same way over and over and over again isn't all it's cracked up to be?
When my movement my movement variability that I could execute things started to diminish. So when I started to hone in on doing less, I got hurt. I performed worse on the basketball court.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking of something as you talk there. If we just think about when we all first add in kettlebell training, or in your instances, the pistol, the single arm push up, that probably was variety for you at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And so that novelty of those great exercises when they were new to you is when they provided the most potential for new benefits. And so one of the things in my head is the best thing that most people could be doing is the thing that they have not been doing, right? That's going to represent the most amount of gains. And there's a big caveat there, which is if you only want to be good at 3 or 4 things, and certainly you need to be doing those things kind of endlessly and forever. But if you're just a normal ass human that wants to feel good, well, you gotta do more shit to be better at more shit.
Yeah.
It's incorrect on a long scale that doing less will yield more. In a short scale, it may help certain people that have been overdoing it or hyper focused elsewhere.
Hmm.
But I'm looking at a long term scale of health, resiliency, and movement enjoyment for a human being.
Hmm.
And that's where the variety comes into play much more predominant, I think.
Yeah. I remember many years ago, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, Eris DeMarco, crazy strong dude. I mean, he could do one arm chin ups, he can deadlift 3 times his body weight. And he made a good observation. He said, true minimalist programs, however you define them, we're going to define them as, let's say, 2 to 3 exercises done ad infinitum. He said they work for about 6 weeks. And then after that, if you want to keep making gains and stay minimalist, you just have to switch to different exercises. So, it's like if you wanted to do bench, squat, and deadlift for 6 weeks and then keep seeing some great gains overall in your strength, you might need to switch to, I'm just going to give an example. Let's say military press, row, and who knows, like front squat or, something like that. And so the strange thing is that there are so many people who've done this stuff for years and they've gotten such minor incremental progress that they never stop and think, why am I not making faster progress if this is such a great approach? Or why am I so hurt all the time if this is, if this is covering so much ground as I've been told?
Yeah, 100%. It's the opportunity cost as well. So what you're saying, 100%, right? Like you start to become out of balance by focusing in so much.
Yeah.
That's the first thing. And then the second thing is the opportunity cost of bringing up things that are supportive of it. So if you're always focused on just the bench and you never do your tricep training, then you probably suffer from being able to take your bench higher. And then you talk to almost any like really good bencher and they're like, your triceps are too weak. Here's a bunch of tricep stuff. And it's like, oh, it wasn't on the program minimum.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's why you're getting minimum gains, bro. So
Yeah.
like get in, you get out what you put in. And so the minimum stuff it just doesn't make sense to me long term,
Yeah.
as we've said. But to your point, in like let's throw them for a wrinkle. One of the things you said is like they'll tweak things a little bit and then go right back to where they're at. That's actually how I would agree with that approach, but then I would go a little bit further and then a little bit further and a little bit further. And it's like what most people, traditionalists, and it's not unique to kettlebells, of course, is that they keep one foot in the little kiddie pool and they'll like toe the grass and then put it right back in the kiddie pool and toe the grass. I'm like, get your bitch ass out of the pool and go over there in the real pool and get
Yeah.
wet, because that's where people are. They're flirting with a couple little things, and I'm in this unique spot because I'm not trying to do variety for variety's sake. Actually, I have some better ideas of how to say this. I think, even though that sentence sucked, was uh, when people say, "What does it mean to move well?" My definition now is you can choose to do things on purpose
Mm-hmm.
rather than having an arbitrary standard like what you do with the FMS or the CES or how you perform your big six. Like if you can do it that way, but then I show you 6 other ways to do it, and you can also do that and do it relatively quickly, you move better than the person that can't choose to do it differently.
Mm-hmm.
Having more movement options in life is absolutely better.
Yeah.
100% of the time.
Yeah. The funny thing when I think about it is that, like, you, uh, we'll use kettlebell instructors as an example. Though, as you pointed out, they're certainly not the only people to do it, because honestly, you see this a lot in powerlifting too, where they're like, just bench, squat, and deadlift, bro. Maybe do a military press every once in a while, but they're not doing any pull-ups. They're not doing any bodybuilding stuff that would help bring up their bench or their squat or their deadlift. It's like they're only doing those things. You find, yeah, they can't do a whole lot of other things, and then they actually can't do the things that they want to do all that well. They max out their adaptive capacity, and then they're just treading water for, in some cases, years at a time, licking their wounds in between because they've got these overuse injuries, they've got these asymmetries that they've never addressed. And I don't really know where it began, but it's something that we see a lot of nowadays. And I think that if you get people to, let's say, use the same rationale that they would use to try to, we'll say, convert people over to kettlebell training, or we'll say strength training in general, because the same thing holds true with barbell training to some degree. They just completely jettison the same rationales that they use later. Like, hey, you know what? I know you like running, or I know you like doing yoga or Pilates or something like that. But if you were to add some strength training to the mix, even just a little bit, you would find that you'd be better at running or yoga or Pilates. Well, then if you tell these same people, hey, look, I know you love the bench, squat, and deadlift, or I know you love, swings and get ups. But if you were just to add a little bit of this, these bodybuilding movements to help get to the areas that you can't get to with the exercises that you're training, or that you can't overload with swings and get ups, or that you can't overload with the bench, squat, and deadlift, you'd actually probably see a big increase. And they completely reject it 100%.
Just they're like deniers of it.
Yeah.
It's just so weird.
Yeah. It's very strange.
It's very, very weird. Well, with variety, like let me give one way that I would put it in for people. If you've only been doing things one way and you choose to do 4 to 5 sets of your exercise per workout, I think that's a pretty normal amount that people do with a ramp, and then 4 to 5 sets. Maybe it's even just 3. A super easy way is pick a subtle variety and only do 2 sets. Make the 2 sets really hard and valuable, and then do 2 of the next thing. So, example, if I'm doing a lateral lunge, which might already be like crazy to some people, but let's say you're doing a lateral lunge. The first 2 sets, your toes are at 45 degrees. The next 2 sets, your toes are straight ahead. You're going to stress the tissues differently. If you take them close to technical failure, then immediately you're managing enough variety to make it meaningful in my head. And, because if you got 2 really hard sets, there's only marginal increases of gains on the 3rd and 4th set anyway. The only time that a bunch of sets make sense is if you're going sub-max strength work to grease the groove and whatnot. But if you're trying to get those sweet muscly gains, then getting close to failure is pretty nice. The piggyback. So when we're talking about these kettlebell drills specifically, and the big 3 of powerlifting that you brought up, what tends to shape our collective value that we ascribe to exercises is whether there's competitions in them. There's competitions in Olympic weightlifting. Mm-hmm. There's also competitions in kettlebell, snatch, clean and press. And so they get lifted up a little bit, but compared to Olympic weightlifting with a barbell, it's like the adopted stepchild that nobody likes, right? Yeah. And so in the kettlebell, very small kettlebell community, they're really cool, but they don't even do them right in sport. And it's like, well, they do them better than you in hard style, so I don't tell you. And so the point I'm trying to make is we have arbitrary exercises that we hold value to. Well, if there is a popular program or a popular competition that was like bent press, windmill, and single leg deadlift, and somehow that shot up the charts, all of a sudden, what is the most important thing to do would change. Mm-hmm. And I think with kettlebells or any exercise in general, like we have this cool opportunity to decide what it is that we want to make important. And the hard part is peer pressure. Yeah. The peer pressure says it's these big 6 or these big 3 or these Olympic lifts. And if it's anything else, it's like you're wasting your time because it's not those. And that's too bad, because of the fact that it's like people celebrating their shitty 5K time as better than your ability to do kettlebell high pulls. Yeah. I'm like, they're the same. They're the same. Like, you're getting no money or reward for your 28-minute 5K. Yeah. And I'm over here swinging a belt in front of the mirror, shirtless, like
wearing American flag tighty whities. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So a little bit rambly, but the point is, I think a lot of people, they get so dogmatic and they get so culty because they want to be a part of what it is. And that's cool. I get that. I understand the appeal to that 100%. I try to create that within our certifications that we run because it is good for business. But the negative is sometimes people, they want to be involved in part of it so much that they just stop any critical thought. They stop any exploration outside of what they've been told, and they just parrot it endlessly, even when it just objectively doesn't make sense.
Yeah. the goal has changed from getting gains, getting fitter, and doing so while becoming more resilient or stronger, and has now changed to identification with a particular group. And like for
100%.
instance, I'm affiliated with Strong First. I love being a part of Strong First. I follow their philosophy very closely, but I think what they do is a part of what I do. So it's not everything that I do, and it's totally cool if it's everything that other people do, from my perspective. But I like to add the extra variety on there because I see it as helping me to do better the stuff that we learn how to do in Strong First. And so I think that having an approach like that does more to add to the system and to communities in general, whichever ones they may be, whether it's powerlifting or Olympic lifting or kettlebell training or what have you. And I think a lot of people are kind of like you said, they're kind of worried about taking that position because of the peer pressure thing. If you're like, yeah, hey, I started doing bicep curls and my elbows don't hurt as much and my pull-ups got stronger. People are like, oh man, bicep curls, dude. What are you, a bodybuilder now? It's like, who doesn't? Like, if anybody tells you they don't want bigger, stronger, more muscular looking arms, they're just lying, and pretending that the best way to get it is just by doing endless pull-ups. It's not completely wrong, but it's not completely right either. So
That's I love that term. You said a bunch of stuff in there that I say in different language, but I'm like, it's not that it's wrong. It's just incomplete.
yeah,
And it doesn't have to try to be incomplete. I'm not even mad when they say, hey, these are really phenomenal ways to do this. It's only when any school says this is the only way to do this.
yeah,
Right. Like I'm a big fan of the landmine new guy. That does like the rotational landmine clean and presses, and he plays 80s music, and he has the world's most masculine voice on the face of the earth. Like this guy is a hero amongst men.
yes.
And but he catches such shit from the Olympic weightlifting crowd. They're like, you're not using the barbell right. I'm like,
Dude. Well, you know what? Actually, on that note, this is funny too because you hear this. People in the hardstyle world hear this all the time from the GS crowd, and I'm not blaming all the GS people because I'm friends with a good many of them. But it's like you're not lifting the kettlebell properly. It's like, okay, the first proper kettlebell competition took place in 1948. Kettlebells we know have been around at a minimum, or at least written in a Russian dictionary since like 1704. So you're going to tell me that from 1704 until 1948, everybody was just walking around in darkness, kettlebells, nobody got gains from kettlebells. And it wasn't until some prophet decided, well, here we're going to do, the all out set of snatches and clean and jerks or whatever. It's like, it's just so myopic. It's ridiculous. And yeah, you hear the same thing with the Olympic lifters too. Like, oh, powerlifting, it's not a sport. It's like, you guys are both just lifting weights. Like, you're not saving the world.
You're moving metal around in
Yeah.
slightly different ways. The sport versus hardstyle conversation is it's interesting to me because it's like if you just had half a brain and you just looked at what it is you're trying to accomplish, it makes sense right away.
Yeah.
The goals are different. If your goal is to be efficient with it because you have to do it nonstop for 10 minutes, then choose the way that is efficient.
Exactly.
Hardstyle, make it hard. It's in the goddamn name.
Yeah.
Make it harder immediately. So,
Yeah.
for instance, I teach that a cast on the way down from the snatch and the clean is totally acceptable so long as you have a little bit of lean back.
Mm-hmm.
In sport, they'll call it, what do they call it? Deflection. Yeah. Which I'm like, to me, whatever, you can call it whatever you want. Like I lean back because it looks like I'm leaning back. I'm very like just descriptive. And I say that it's important. I think like if you got kettlebell people that are trying to teach brand new kettlebellers to immediately stay within the phone booth or stay vertical on the downswing, the reason that you choose that is to make the eccentric harder to manage. It's a bigger strength overload. And if they're new, that's actually a shit reason to use it because they need to develop into that. Mm-hmm. And so if you have a cast with an appropriate lean back, that means your center of mass between your upper body and the bell stays over your feet. The only reason a cast is potentially bad is if it pulls you forward onto your toes and then pulls it too far away from you. But if you can, which most people do, if we're being honest, most people have a reflexive little lean back. What that actually allows you to do is engage the shoulder muscles, the lat, but the armpit muscles and everything, so that you catch and guide down on the backswing instead of throw and hope for the best at the bottom. The reason that people end up going squatty at the bottom with their cleans and snatches is because they don't have that shoulder extension strength in catching a downward moving heavy metal load, because they've never been asked to do anything like that in their life before. And so if you want to have more success with people right off the bat, just reject the idea that it has to be up and down on the descent of the swing. On the way up, it should be vertical. But you're not managing those massive eccentric forces on the way up. You're guiding it up. And the reason you're doing that is so that your hand can move around the bell and you don't have the forward to back impulse, so that when you move into shoulder flexion or overhead position, it doesn't rip your shoulder backwards on you, or you don't take the kettlebell blasting you in the shoulder. And this is the interest, like this is one, I bring it up because it's as contentious, as silly as that is, it's a contentious topic. But if you look at the execution of some sport, they have more casting a lot of times, right? They have huge deflection. They teach the deflection because it makes it easier. And that's on purpose, because if you want to not blow your load in the first 2 minutes of a 10-minute effort, you need to save some for the end. And so this deflection or the lean back on the descent of a snatch or clean just makes you more efficient.
Yeah.
And that to me just shapes the difference between the two. Like, one is an endurance sport and one is a sprint. If you're a marathoner, are you going to go at your 100-meter sprint effort? No, because you're going to blow your load in the first 2 minutes. You won't make it to the end of the marathon. And that's the biggest difference between the two. And so when we're arguing about what's right and what's wrong, it's like, no, you're not even doing the same thing.
Yeah.
So of course they're different.
Yeah, I think to summarize that is that when somebody says, "Oh, you got to do it this way or that way," the question is, "Well, what's your goal?" I remember a number of years ago on the Dragon Door forum, there was I don't know what the debate was even about. Well, it was a GS versus hardstyle thing. It seems like that has mostly died down now, but at the time, at least, it seemed like it was just this huge thing. It was like this onslaught of a GS crowd being like, the hardstyle is a joke, whatever. But Jeff Newport chimed in, and he just had a great response, because again, it was the same thing. Like, well, they're swinging wrong. Like the GS swing is better, and so he said, all you have to ask these people is better for what? And he said basically the same thing you're saying. He said, if your goal is that you want to do a long extended set and you want your, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember exactly what he said, but essentially it was that if you want to do swings as, like, let's say, an assistance exercise for your snatches or your clean and jerks, and one of the requirements of that event is that you have to be able to endure for minutes at a time, whatever the movement is, well then, yeah, the GS swing would certainly be better. But if your goal is fat loss, general fitness, and whatever other points there may have been, well, then the hardstyle swing is great. But it really does come down to that. It's like, what is your goal? And if you think something is better, then you have to be able to answer the question, better for what?
100%. Cool segue, if I can take it as a segue.
Yeah.
So the better for what, as another example, on our backswing of the swing or clean or snatch, is your back almost parallel to the floor? Is it more upright, or is it in the middle at that athletic swing? Which one is the one you want to do? And most people would say it's the athletic swing, because it's where you probably will produce the most power. And I would say, yes, if your goal is to produce the most power. But what if I thought you had hamstrings that needed extra love? How am I setting you up? I'm letting your chest come down further. I'm getting you a more specific hamstring-driven execution. If I want a faster turnover from snatch to snatch, I'll actually have you a little squattier.
Oh, yeah.
The bell has less time on the backswing. I can throw it down even farther because it's going straight down. And why are we scared of vertical hang cleans anyway? If we're not scared of them with the barbell, how could we ever be scared of them with the kettlebell? That's always baffled me. But it's just like one step further. So that his point of what is it you're trying to accomplish. And that's where, like, I just watched somebody that went through a hard style thing a year and a half or two ago, and he's got his own program, and he's showing a deadlift, and he's like, you can't deadlift like this. And it was a flat back. It was an RDL, because you aren't produce as much power. That's why we always do it like this. I'm like, so you're telling everyone to never RDL? Dog, what are we doing right now?
Yeah.
Like you're literally just saying, repeating shit like a parrot, and a parrot is a bird brain.
Yeah.
It doesn't have the capacity to think for itself and understand nuance and further. It just is repeating, and it's silly.
Yeah. And, I think in the early days of, you don't know what you don't know. That's part of it. And so it's like, and I can say this for sure, even now, that, the less you know, the more you think you know. And I think of this, for instance, because like I've started taking up boxing and wrestling. Remarkably, there's a place not far from me that teaches wrestling, which is extremely hard to find for adults. So I was very happy to have found it. And one of the things that I'm like, I'm seeing it, particularly with wrestling, I'm seeing, like I'm actually making some pretty quick progress. Like I'm good with these techniques. And I'm like, man, I'm getting pretty good. It's only been like a couple of lessons, but even the teachers just like, wow, you're doing really great. You're making some very fast progress. So then in my head, I think like, oh, I'm just a natural. I'm super good. I could wrestle anybody. And then, when I actually have to wrestle somebody who's like, who did it in high school, which I certainly didn't, or, has been taking these classes for a couple of years, I'm like, dang, there's a lot of stuff I don't know. I just haven't been exposed to the fact that I don't know it. And so now when I get a nice compliment, like, oh, you're making some good progress, this and that, I know how to contextualize it. Like it's not referring to you're getting better than everybody. It's that you're getting better than the way you were before. So you have to keep your ego in check. I don't think it's a bad thing to have an ego, but I think you have to keep it in check so that you don't wreck yourself. You got to check yourself so you don't wreck yourself. But the same thing goes with exercise, especially because people are looking to you to lead them. And if you're like, oh, the RDLs are bad, or stiff leg deadlifts are bad, or or what have you, or it's like it's doing them a huge disservice, as opposed to saying this is a perfectly good variation, but it's not what we're working on right now. So I don't want you to do it like this now. Let's work on this later. You know what I mean?
It amazing. So I say this in every story. I'm like, that's a good drill. It's not the drill I showed you, but it's a fine drill.
Yeah.
If you were trying to do something slightly different. Like we actually, one of the things I like to use is I'll show you ways not to do something because I think it pulls you forward and it's going to make you do an accidental somersault in the windmill, on a half kneeling windmill, right? Don't do it that way. Otherwise, move your feet over here, and just the position that you change simply changes the stretch, which changes the overload spot, which changes the stimulus. But they're all fine. You just have to understand that instead of this black and white, the Bulgarian split squat, this thing caught on social media where people, they sit down, extend their leg, roll forward, and that's the length for a Bulgarian split squat.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, that's a length, but you
Yeah.
could certainly go shorter or longer. What are you talking about right now? How is this even the thing that you can't comprehend on your own? Or anyway, I don't want to spend too much time feeling like we're ragging on things. But
I
I
do.
think
Let's
it's
rag away.
important. Yeah. Well, I have the idea for a podcast called The Mad Trainer,
Yeah.
where it's a shout out to Bad Boy Records in the 90s because they had the Mad Rapper, and he
Oh,
gets
I
on,
see.
and they go, yo, tell him why you mad, son. And he says, well, first of all, you can't be asking me no fucking questions. I'm gonna tell you why I'm mad. I'm gonna tell you why I'm mad. So I just want to get people on. I'm like, you got 10 minutes. Tell them why you mad. And
Do
then you
it.
tell them why
Dude,
you're mad.
I'll jump on. I would be glad to be your first guest on that podcast.
Yeah, I gotta figure out when to make that happen, but I think it's funny enough.
Yeah.
So with this, the opportunity. So shifting from just saying that it's silly to be dogmatic in your approach. The real problem is that they end up cementing home their neural engram of how they do something so deep that they actually cannot create new patterns. They actually have a very hard time with it. And a good example is a lot of trainers do everything toes out, about 45 degrees, 30, 45 degrees, because they can squeeze and feel their butt cheeks more. Okay, that's a sensation feel. You can squat easier there because you create more space. Like there's good reasons to do it there. But if you do everything there with the same intention of external rotation, squeezy, when I have you do something like a speed skater side to side, then you try to do it with your toes out and your knees out, which makes you susceptible to terrible position and certainly not explosive. Because in a speed skater, You should have toes forward so you can find the lateral edge. Your knee should be over the big toe because you want that pointed in shin angle because your shin points where you're going to go.
Yeah.
And they just reflexively have a hard time with it.
Yeah.
Similarly, like a kickstand, kickstand swings are great. I would argue I would prefer people to use kickstand swings than a 2-leg swing, mostly because most people can get deeper, more comfortable into their hinges from a kickstand than a bilateral. They don't have to manage double protraction, which is a flexion-based thing, or a protracted plays with flexion of the upper back. And when you start flexing there, for some people, it makes it harder to manage not flexing through the lower back, right? Especially if you're in a double overhand position, which is relative internal rotation of the hand. So that internal rotation plays with that protraction, plays with that flexion, makes it harder to manage not flexing through the lower back. When you get rid of the bilateralness of it, it just makes it easier to manage. Yeah. So kickstand stance, right? But now but you can only go with the contralateral hand. And that allows some people to still push their knee out and be successful because of the weight distribution, what they do with their non-target leg. But if I get them on an ipsilateral side, they just keep falling over to the side of the bell because they have gotten rid of their ability to actually like pronate of the foot and internally rotate that tibia and keep their weight distributed on the inside edge plus the heel of the foot and effectively load that glute because they're always in a shortened position that's pulling laterally. And I'm like, that might not be awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the funny thing too is that if you think about it, like, okay, yeah, I remember you mentioned this once. This was on I think in an Instagram story a couple of years ago, talking about calluses and why we get them. And it's like you just have continually loaded the skin in such a way that it just adapts like that. It's not a big deal. It's what happens. But then think about that in terms of movement patterns, or think about it in terms of like, and I still use this example, like a credit card. If you take a credit card and you bend it back and forth repeatedly in the exact same way, it starts to get weak in the middle. It gets this kind of white spot where now that's the weakest point of the credit card. But if you're constantly changing the way and the angle that you're bending it, it's no worse for the wear. Now, it's not a perfect analogy because I would argue that if you're doing it in all these different directions with the human body, it actually gets stronger and it gets, you really don't see that with a credit card, but the analogy is still very good because people can see, okay, so if I'm only ever doing this one way, and then I'm wondering, gosh, why does my back bug me when I do swings, or why do my knees bug me when I do squats? Some of it may be because you're just doing the same thing the same way repeatedly. Some of it could also be a technique issue. There could be muscle imbalances. Maybe you need to toss in some other exercises. But the key, with all of these different things is that generally speaking, it is variety that is going to do you more good over the long run. And then when you have those short periods of time when you need to peak, that's when you can drop out variety. And if we're going back, let's say we'll take just a look at like the powerlifters in like the 70s and the 80s, really, I would say at the peak of powerlifting when it was really creative and interesting and created some really pretty impressive legends in the sport. Well, that's when they were doing the most assistance work. Like, like Kurt Karwoski, basically, the guy who squatted 1,000+ pounds for 2 reps at 275 pounds. He basically trained like a bodybuilder for a very long period of time. I mean, he did tons of assistance work. And then what they would do is as they got closer to the competition, they would just drop it out. So it's not like they never made any time for what we might call minimalist training or training with very little variety. It's that they knew how to do it strategically. It wasn't their modus operandi. It was something that they would shift into. It's like if you get into a car and you're like, I'm only ever going to drive in third gear. It's like you're probably going to burn something out pretty quickly. You're going to have a crappy driving experience. You're not going to go very fast.
Totally. Well, that guy hit Kurt, right?
Yeah.
He competed in powerlifting.
Exactly.
Of course, he needs to minimize it. What's comical to me, and I'm not one to make fun of anybody's. Well, maybe I am, but like I try not to be judgmental about what people want to do. And so I guess if like you get off on just doing 2 things for 6 months in a row, knock yourself out. Like it does not resonate with me at all. But this idea that you should do the minimal so you can go enjoy theoretical things you're doing outside of the gym. Most of these people aren't doing anything outside of the gym.
Exactly.
right? And so this has been a revelation to me in how I frame this, because the term I've been using the term be athletic for 15 years now, right? Like I think my company name was Be A Training. Be able first. That's your first progression. Then be athletic. That's your make things more interesting. More things to control is more athletic. Doesn't mean you're dunking on somebody. It just means you have more things to control. A split stance versus a bilateral stance, as an example. And
Yeah.
then finally, it's be adaptable. Can you take the skills and qualities that you developed and adapt them and relatively quickly do a new thing or do it slightly differently? And so for me, when I'm training, I'm trying to create the opportunity for my clients and myself to express athleticism in the gym, because I don't have athleticism needs otherwise. If we're being real, I'm not going to play basketball because I can't trust the variables of other bozos undercutting me, or the fact that I've got a big meniscal tear and I don't know from that truly variable dynamic court potential, I could get hurt. More than that, I've got a busy work schedule with travel and a 3 and a 6 year old. So the only time I can go play basketball would be in the evenings, which is represented, each week I want to see my 6 year old in the evenings. So
Yeah.
if I'm going to take away 20% of my opportunity to hang out with the kid, I wouldn't feel very good about that. So most adults actually don't have the time availability to logistically go and play and do true sport. Because when you say on your post, or you try to argue with an S&C person, like, well, if you want to do athletic stuff in sport, go play a sport. You're like, well, dumbass, like, I know that's easy for you to say as a 23-year-old bonehead,
Yeah.
but with an actual like adulting responsibilities, it ceases to be a valid opportunity. And so training athletic, meaning training more qualities, meaning multi-direction, change of points of contact, different speeds, different control, that is what I'm trying to create the opportunity for clients to have within the gym. And it just means changing one or two variables at a time and progressively getting more interesting or challenging without jumping the shark and becoming a circus trick. And that's where, yes, that could be like eye in the beholder, but also like if you're doing like, it when you see it, like, oh, that's stupid.
Yeah.
And I definitely do stuff like, I mean, this is how frustrating things are. I was mocking myself by doing a snatch dance on hopscotch. And somehow this son of a bitch had hundreds of shares with people being like, this is a great idea. And I was like, oh, God damn it. I was doing
Sometimes
this.
you just gotta, you just gotta lean into it. You're like, all right, this is what the people want.
Yeah, but it just blew my mind because I was like, this is why we can't have nuance. And it goes down into why in instruction, it's easier to go, this is the way, don't do it a different way.
Yeah.
That is simple to coach.
Yes.
The nuance, a lot of people don't have the length in the field and experience to be able to appreciate the nuance. They just want you to tell them, how do I do this?
Yes. 100%. I want to build on that because for two things. Okay. First, I want to tell you my theory, my unified theory of social media. Now, I have a decent sized following. It used to be bigger before my Facebook and Instagram accounts got nuked. Folks who are listening, if you do not have two-factor authentication on your social media accounts, please do that, because if a hacker gets into your account like they did to mine, it will very possibly be gone. But fortunately, my professional page on Facebook remains. And one of the things that I noticed is that a lot of times it's whatever's most entertaining that gets people most interested. Because, you think about it, when it comes to people's training, yeah, let's look at the way that we would learn kettlebells or any sort of strength training. It's taught as we take ourselves very seriously. This is super important. This could cure cancer. Who knows? It's like that level of seriousness, as opposed to, hey, this should be fun. Obviously, here are the principles that you want to maintain, but, death is winning. So get people to do something. Well, I think that what's great about the hopscotch thing is you could very easily use that to say, hey, this is an example of me being able. What was the third A? It was be athletic, be able, be adaptable.
Correct.
Yes. So this is me being adaptable because I did not practice this. I didn't do a 6 week periodized program. Like, okay, the first week I'm just going to do the first 3 hops, and then next week I'm gonna add a fourth hop in there, and then the fifth, and then I'm gonna take a back off week. Obviously that works, but for something like that, that's a sort of a thing that you can do just for fun without thinking about it. And if it's on Instagram, of course, it's going to get boatloads of shares. But it's a perfect way of saying this is the third BA in my system. I may never do this again, but 5 years from now, I might decide, oh, I'm just going to do it for fun. And you'll be able to do it, or you'll be adaptable enough to be able to do it still. So even though people might be missing the forest for the trees, at a minimum, they're going to have this idea, or they're going to have this idea in mind that, well, he did this without really even practicing. It just sort of, came to him because of the other stuff that he did. And to your point about athleticism, I think you're completely right. The same thing with strength. It's like, I think 1 rep max strength is very cool. A lot of people are convinced that they need to practice it. So I try to find them where they are and say, great, you want to increase your military press or, do weighted pull-ups. So here's what you're going to do to make sure that you're less likely to get hurt along the way, or more likely to be successful without burning yourself out. Because underlying, that's really what people want. Nobody is like, I want to get a heavier military press at all costs. They still want to be able to pick up their kid and throw them up in the air, and they still want to be able to roughhouse with their kids and things like that. And so, but a lot of people aren't really thinking about. A lot of people aren't verbalizing that because it doesn't sound cool. It sounds way cooler to tell your trainer, yeah, I want to press a 32 kilo bell. I want to do the snatch test. I want to do this and that. But they wouldn't. They would quit if it meant getting hurt, being stiff, being sore all the time. And so you got to be able to give them a path that will get them there or get them pretty close. That's also going to be enjoyable and in some cases maybe even entertaining.
Yeah. Cosine.
Good. That's probably the shortest answer that you've ever given anything. Cosine. I like that.
Cosine. I don't have anything to add to it. I mean, it is what it is.
It's kind of like that scene in what was it? Old School, where Will Ferrell, he's like on the debate team and he like confers with his people.
Blacks out.
Yeah, exactly. He just like blurts out this really long thing, and James Carville, the Democratic strategist, is like, "That was perfect. We have no rebuttal." And yeah.
What happened? I blacked out.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like that just happened to me, and you're James Carville, only way more
same hairstyle.
Exactly. Well, but way more jacked.
Thanks.
Yes, I will give you that credit. Absolutely. Well, any final notes that we should leave people with to get them to maybe not change their wily ways, but change the way that they think so that they can see that there are more options available to them to charge boldly forward?
Yeah, I mean, I'll challenge with 2 things: a swing challenge for them and a snatch challenge for them. And they can always look at my page to see some of this. So the swing challenge. Most people swing in exactly the same stance with roughly the same knee and hip flexion with every swing, even if they're going longer reps or max effort singles, right? I challenge you to change your goddamn foot stance. So it's this easy. And this is one of the things we cover in the course. So like if I do it on social media, I'm not giving away secrets. The more wide your feet are, the more innies that you use, relatively speaking, the more adductors. The more your toes are pointed out, the more innies you get, relatively speaking. The more your knees bend, the more fronties or quads you will use. The straighter your knees, the more backsies or the hamstrings that you will use. And if you actually want to use your glutes in a swing, then you should probably involve some rotation and abduction to be able to hit those in a unique way that is not just extension, because I don't care how you do your swings. If your butt's going forward and back, whether it be squatty or knee bendier or hingier with less knee bend, your ass is going to be doing roughly the same amount. So if you want actual new potential 3D butt building stuff, you got to move diagonally, rotationally, and side to side to some degree. That's how you 3D vectorize your ass cheeks. So that's your first challenge. If you're going to do 10 sets of swings, pick 10 different stances and just watch how you challenge your tissues. You're still a goddamn hinge. It's absolutely mind-boggling. Like if you want max effort, yeah, do it in the max effort stance. But other than that, get some other stuff going on in your life. You can't do it. It speaks to your ability to be able to, be adaptable. And there's the next one. I post on this a lot. It's the step up snatch, right? So I got a bench in front of me. I set up in that kickstand stance, and I'm pushing through the forefoot. And this is specifically why I think it's potentially beneficial for more hard style, any kettlebell, honestly, because what are we always pushing through in a traditional kettlebell sense is through the heel. And through the heel is strictly a weight room quality builder, because nothing athletic goes through the heels, right? Like, tell me one thing, I guess tug of war. Other than that, if you're on your heels, the other coach is like, we got them on their heels, boys. Mm-hmm. That means that they're about to lose. And this is not, and it's like an over exaggerated point I'm trying to make, because clearly training through your heels develops strength qualities that are applicable in other things. But what I have seen, because I've been fortunate to teach about 450 different certifications and workshops in the last 14 years, I've seen a lot of trainers, right? You just average 20, and I probably average more than that. That's like 9,000 trainers that I've watched. Trainers are really embarrassingly bad about being able to manage their weight distribution and athleticism through the forefoot and toes, because they don't do athletic stuff. And therefore, they do everything flat-footed, especially drive through your heels, which is a cue that is taught in squatting, deadlifting, swings, cleans, snatches, etc. And so they lose this ability to actually produce force effectively through the ball of the foot, which is how you would move if you were traversing the land, field of play, whatever. So the step up snatch is a vertical snatch. And when I say vertical, I mean that it has no backswing component. It could be side to side, a little bit diagonal. It just means the absence of a backswing, so that you don't really have this amortization phase on the downswing to the upswing. So the bell starts on the floor, tiny forward tip. You explode up and forward through your forefoot, and you step and catch the snatch. Then you come back down, you do it again, switch hands, whatever you want to do. But it's just a concentric. It's damn near a half snatch, if we want to use that terminology. But what I'll see, because it's really cool, the certification that we're teaching now, which you'll appreciate the name, FKT, which is Functional Kettlebell Training. And so it's GET FKT, which when you say phonetically is get fucked. And every shirt says, I got fucked in Nashville, or I got fucked in St. Louis, I got fucked in Dallas.
I told you that you really need to find like an Arizona strength studio and then just use that as like right after the, yeah.
Yeah, well, somebody told me that Atlanta has a nickname, which is the A. So that shirt is going to be fucking crazy.
Yeah, that would be the shirt that you only wear in certain locales. That would be for sure.
So the step up snatch as a just a option for people that have been kettlebelling a lot, add it in, because the unique thing that you're going to feel is you will find out that by pushing through your big toe and forefoot in that squattier kickstand position with the up forward intent, you will still smoke your ass. You don't have to have heavy heels to smoke your ass. So when you set up at the bottom, you're going to go, ooh, I'm feeling my calf, my DMO, and my butt cheek. And you go through this, and it's just a totally different opportunity. And most of, the where I was going with saying our kettlebell cert, it's been great, because I probably attract about 25 to 33% of the participants are established kettlebellers. And when they come in, the more traditional they've been in their practice, the harder a time they have accomplishing new tasks, the less adaptable they are. And I think that is pretty instructive for them on like where they have movement opportunities. What have they developed? Like, dog, you are really good at that swing. Maybe you don't need to get any better, because what is better going to do for you? You're swinging 100 swings in a row one-handed with that 70-pound bell. Like, what do you think is going to happen if you do it with 72 pounds? Anything extra? No, like nothing extra is going to be beneficial for you except for a high five. So those two things: switch your goddamn stances and your swings occasionally, try it for a while, watch what happens. You get juicier adductors and crotch. And then on the step up snatch, you're going to find your calves and your ability to move at least forward a little bit, which is usually where we want to go in life, is forward, not backwards.
Very much so. Folks, give it a try. Check out Clif's very interesting Instagram. And by the way, where can people follow you? This will be in the show notes and in the description and stuff like that.
Just at Clifton Harski, and if you're lucky, I'll still be doing my '80s montage bit.
Good. Yeah, we need some more of that 80s montage business with the whole new wave retro music playing in the background, you know. It's my fave.
It's preposterously funny to me, and that's why I keep doing it.
You know, I think that's what you got to do, because not only do people like, oh, okay, this guy is, you know, he's funny and relatable, but I kind of like this stuff too. And so you end up attracting the right people, and you have the less hard selling you need to do on these concepts, because I think that but people want to be led, and if they are led by a guy who likes, you know, Borat mankinis and 80s montages and things like that, well, they can be like, all right, well, I found my guy. You lead me, sir. I will go wherever you tell me.
Amazing.
Yes. So, Clif, thank you very much. By the way, do you have a website that we could add to that mix of things?
Get PPSC.com. That's Get Pain Free Performance Specialist Certification.com.
All right. Get PPSC.com. Check it out. Clif, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
And folks, as always, have fun and happy training.